You're listening to Play Therapy Community Podcast, episode 63.
Welcome to Play Therapy Community Podcast, providing connection, information, and inspiration to child therapists all around the world. Here's your host, a licensed psychotherapist, a registered play therapist, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
Hi there, Jackie Flynn here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Play Therapy Community Podcast. Well, today I have a very special guest on the show, someone that I admire a lot and that I have learned a lot from. She was on my Parenting in the Rain podcast. You may remember her. Her name is Dr. Dalena Dillman Taylor, and she's just so fantastic and so knowledgeable. So thank you so much for being on the show, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.
Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So right now I am an assistant professor at the University of Central Florida, and I'm the Center for Play Therapy Training and Research Director, as well as the Play Therapy Certificate Coordinator over there. So we run a program of 4 different classes if you're needing your continuing education units for APT to get your registered play therapist credential, or you're just curious about what that is. I attended the University of North Texas, both for my master's and my PhD program, and specialized in play therapy, and really learned from some of the people that I admire most in the play therapy world, you know, Sue, Bratton, D. Ray, and Terry Kottman. And so it's really wonderful to hear that you've enjoyed so much about what we've done at the University of Central Florida. It's kind of bringing that knowledge to Florida that I'm able to share with others to really support the children in our community.
Oh, yeah. I remember being in your classes and your trainings. I took the Adlerian Play Therapy training with you and the child-parent relationship therapy training and the coursework that went into my requirements for a registered play therapist. And I feel super prepared in the field, and I really attribute a lot of that to just being under your direction and feeling your passion. And seems like, looking back on those nights listening to you, just up there in front of the class, and then you would have us make up play kits and record sessions with some kids and really practicing out these skills. I feel like I got the best education. So I really feel so grateful to you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, tonight I want to talk about Adlerian Play Therapy. And I know a lot of people may not even know what that is. So could you describe Adlerian Play Therapy for us?
Absolutely. So Adlerian Play Therapy is actually developed by Terry Kottman in the early 90s. A big part of it is that it integrates individual psychology or Adlerian theory into the practice of play therapy. Adlerians believe that people are both socially embedded, that they're subjective and creative beings whose behavior is purposeful and goal-directed. When we're utilizing Adlerian theory within play therapy, we really look at the goals of children to see how they desire to connect with others and to gain significance in their life. And that really is drawn from their early childhood experiences, in their world, in their environment, or with others, and how they actually, what their perspective is of that, or how they've kind of internalized those experiences to really help them understand how they view themselves, others, in the world. And through that vision or that worldview, in Adlerian terms, we call it the lifestyle, so the overall worldview of a child or an adult if you're working, with Adlerian theory with individuals. Mm-hmm. It's just this idea of how do I gain significance in life, and how do I connect with others? How do I feel like I belong? And a lot of times that's mistaken because of our early childhood experiences. And so our goal within Adlerian Play Therapy through the 4 phases, and I can outline those in just a second, but through those 4 phases, it really is helping us to understand who this child is and how can we intervene with them to help them modify some of those beliefs to be more realistic. Because right now they're fairly mistaken in the sense that through their own worldview, they've internalized some of these experiences in a negative way. So Adlerian actually occurs across 4 phases. So the first one is building an egalitarian relationship, so this equal relationship between the therapist and the child. And really this comes at it from more of a non-directive perspective. And what that means is I want in the playroom for the child to feel safe with me, to feel that I truly hear them and I understand who they are, and that I'm different than other adults in their life. And so how can we get on this equal playing field? The other part of it is, a big part, I guess, of Adlerian play therapy in general is this idea of sharing power. So within this model, it really is helping children understand some real life experiences as well. And so a part of play therapy, sometimes when you go completely non-directive, the child leads the play the entire time, but in an Adlerian framework, it's really hard for us to be able to say to a child that you can lead all the time, because where else in their life do they actually get to be completely 100% in charge? Yes. Maybe they are at home because they have a permissive parent, but that they don't get that, role in school, or when they get older in adolescence with their friends, or even when they're getting a job as they kind of enter into adulthood. That doesn't happen all the time. And so even from the very first moment of working with a child, it's how do we create this equal relationship that together we're going to share power within the session in order for us to both feel safe, in order for you to feel that you can connect in a positive way, and to feel that you're significant in a positive way as well.
It seems like that would really empower the child and build that inner feeling of I'm worthy, as well as really trust that that's going to happen. It kind of feels like child-centered to me, like in the beginning, a little bit. They are very similar in the beginning. I think the difference is for the 2 of them, and then we can come back to the other 3 phases. But really one of the main differences between child-centered play therapy and Adlerian play therapy is the belief in the child. So it's for child-centered, they truly believe the child has the capacity to change as long as they experience the therapist-led core conditions, which we've learned, in school, is empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. And so as long as a child is experiencing those, change can occur. And so that's where that non-directive perspective comes from. The view of children in Adlerian is not, I wouldn't say very different, but is different in the sense of we truly believe that children need to experience those same things from us as a therapist. And we want to collaborate with the child to work with them, knowing that we're socially embedded creatures and that naturally we depend on each other. So how can we create more of this interdependence, as Dan Siegel would call it, within therapy? Because that's really what we are hoping for children in general as they grow into adults, is no one should have to do something in a silo, in isolation, and no one should have to be 100% dependent on somebody else, because then you lose who you are. So how can we help them find that balance? Absolutely. I've been reading a lot of Dr. Siegel's work. I'm reading Mindsight now, and he really talks a lot about the mirror neurons and just the power of connectedness and how that could be healing.
Absolutely. And a lot of what's coming out in the neuroscience literature really is supporting some of these basic tenets of Adlerian theory that, Adler created almost over 100 years ago, and Terry Kottman then modified in the 90s to really fit within the Adlerian play therapy.
So it's been around since the 90s. That's cool.
Yes. She actually developed it as part of her dissertation when she was graduating from the University of North Texas. It was a big part of kind of her focus, and then she's been perfecting it ever since. And so it's really fascinating to kind of watch that growth of Adlerian Play Therapy. I mean, from someone who did it because she just felt like what was out there wasn't working. And now, as of the end of last year, SAMHSA has now recognized Adlerian Play Therapy as evidence-based for children with disruptive behaviors. So really getting to see in just a couple of decades the changes that can take place if you really believe in something that you're doing.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome. So the first phase is just really, being on that equal playing field with the child and giving them that power in the playroom.
Yes. And then so when you feel that you've really met that relationship, you really feel like you've built it. Some children build this in half a session. Some children, depending on maybe the experience, early childhood trauma that they've had, it takes them a lot longer to trust somebody. And so you might have this wide range depending on the child. And that's another thing I really like about Adlerian Play Therapy is that you're not really needing to follow necessarily a strict, guide, step by step. This is what I do, which takes a lot of that personality out of it. And so based on the child's needs is when I decide when I need to change into the next phase. And so for Adlerian Play Therapy with phase 1, what you're noticing is that once the child stops having majority of the session being restrictive play, so very focused on maybe one thing, feeling really, as Terry would call, tight, so wound up, not able to kind of express themselves or not engaging the therapist. As you start seeing that shift where most of the session is turning more to non-restrictive play, where they might be engaging the therapist either verbally or non-verbally, you can tell that relationship has been established. Although it needs to continue to be worked on throughout the 4 phases, it is happening, and therefore you can start shifting into phase 2, which is investigating the lifestyle. And in this phase, the therapist becomes more directed. You're trying to gauge and understand the client or the child's lifestyle. So how do they view themselves, others, in the world? And there's a lot of things to take into consideration. You're taking into consideration their personality priorities. You're taking into consideration the crucial C's, so how they connect, how they feel courage, how do they feel like they count or that they matter. You're taking in all these pieces, and there's like 10 or 11 pieces. And so if you're interested in what that is, and this seems to really fit with who you are, I highly encourage you to read Terry Kottman and Kristen Meany-Wallen's book, Adlerian Play Therapy, Partners in Play, the 3rd edition, because it can really help unpack. I mean, I don't think we have time tonight for me to tell you everything that goes into it, because it's quite complicated when you first learn about it. But then, I was just reviewing their book just for some tips earlier. And what they really noted about overall in general is choosing a theory that really fits with how you also view the world. And so if you're wanting to try on Adlerian Play Therapy or Adlerian theory, do you really view children or adults as this, you believe that all behavior is purposeful, that we're socially embedded creatures, that we view things in a very subjective way, that we're creative or goal-directed. And if you really seem to fit with like, yes, that's how I see people, on a daily basis, then Adlerian Play Therapy might be right for you, or it may not. So that's something to consider. And so if you are interested in this and it seems to be like, yes, this is how I view my clients, then I would highly recommend digging in deeper, especially when we start getting into these next few phases, because there's a lot of material there.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that book in the show notes. I haven't read that myself. I'd like to read that. It seems like when you believe in it yourself, and then you're also following that, the tenets of that therapy, you can really deliver the services with like that authenticity and that passion, and it comes out in a very different way.
Right. And we know that the relationship is the most critical element of therapy. It's not the techniques you use. It's not, the skills that you have. It really is how you connect with your clients. And so you want to have something that really fits with you, because then that means you're more genuine in session versus, connecting with a theory just because maybe this is what insurance pays for right now, so I'm going to try this one out.
Yes.
Well, then it's going to feel really inauthentic to your clients, and they may not come back, or they may not really feel that you care about them.
Yeah.
And that can really limit what you're able to do in therapy. So just as in phase one, how there are things that, you look for to know or give you clues of moving into the next phase, same thing with phase two, investigating the lifestyle. Once you feel that you have a good idea of how this child views themselves, others, and the world, and what's amazing is also in the book there is a conceptualization chart. And so you start filling this out from the very first session. How do you think that they see themselves? How, where are they falling on the continuum of their life task? Life task being the family or social or school or their self. Like, how are they viewing them? And if you feel like you have a good sense of who this child is based on this information that you've gathered, then you're ready to start moving into phase three. And between phase 2 and 3 is when you start developing your treatment plan. And so sometimes this can feel a little off-putting for therapists, because a lot of times you need a treatment plan after session 1 if you're going to get reimbursed.
Yeah, so depending on what setting you're in, just having that treatment plan so late in the game may not necessarily be an option.
Exactly. And so that part can be really challenging. And the purpose of developing a treatment plan after phase 2 is that you really know the child.
Yes.
And so then you know how to tailor the techniques and the skills that you're going to be using in phase 3 to fit with that child versus a one-size-fits-all mentality. And so once you have that, that's when you really shift into the treatment plan and then move into phase 3, which is gaining insight. And so what happens in phase 3 is that the therapist now feels that they have a good tentative idea of who this child is and how they view the world. And therefore, they're sharing that in a very non-authoritarian way. So giving them like hypotheses, like tentative ideas or guesses as to how maybe they're viewing themselves, trying that out for the child to really start internalizing some of these, to have these aha moments of, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. And that can really help a child see the world a little bit differently.
Yes, when it comes from within.
Exactly. And I think, going back to kind of what we were talking about with CCPT, I feel like some of the same skills are utilized within this phase, this idea of, in Adlerian theory, we call it meta-communication. In child-centered, it's more called enlarging the meaning. Both purposes are to help the child see, like mirror how they're viewing themselves and to mirror that back to them. The difference is that child-centered doesn't teach anything afterwards. They just put that out there for the child to start internalizing, believing that the child will take that in and make those changes because they have that capacity within themselves to change. Whereas Adlerian actually shifts into their final phase, which is phase 4, the reorientation, re-education phase. And this is where they teach children. So either they're going to teach them new skill sets, or they're going to model it for them. They're going to role play with the child. Sometimes they might go into the child's classroom with them to practice it. Sometimes they might invite another child into the therapy to really work on it. When I've worked with really young children, this is when I do more family play work. So now I want the child, maybe the identified patient, quote unquote, within their family, to really start practicing some of these new skills with someone supportive, being the therapist, to to start highlighting for the other family members that the child really has changed and they're trying new things. And so really seeing that process kind of unfold within the family system in a safe environment. And so that can happen with younger children. But there's a lot of different ways to really help the child and make this model fit to be the best, to meet the needs of the child in order for them to really change and to have the skills generalized. Because that's a big part of Adlerian, is that we don't want them to just be able to do it in the playroom. We want them to be able to utilize some of these new skills that they've learned at home, at school, in different settings, with their friends, so that they start feeling good about themselves and gaining some of that self-worth again and feelings of, I can do this, I matter.
Yeah, and really being able to apply it to all areas of their life. And I think when, even like in that phase 2, the conceptualization chart really allows you to get that customization that really allows you to tweak the approach to that specific client so you could give them, exactly what they need.
Absolutely. It's really neat because, in Adlerian theory, we believe that we're creative beings. Well, this doesn't just stop with believing that the child is a creative being either. It's also with us as a therapist. So we get to kind of put on our thinking hats and decide, what intervention might work best with a child based on how they're viewing themselves, others in the world. So it's not that I'm just going to a conference and saying, oh, this seems really cool, I want to try this out with my next client. It's that I'm actually thinking about what are these child's needs and how can I really help them see differently their view of themselves. And so I can make up, activities for them that really is going to fit that need. I can pull from other theories. I can pull from other disciplines, all as long as it's intentionally placed within the treatment plan to really support modifying the way that they're viewing themselves, others in the world. So we really get to be creative.
So it's very specific in terms of this is your goal, but you get to kind of pull what that kid needs and use your creativity to give them exactly what works for them. So it's not confining in that respect at all.
Right.
Now,
yes.
what with parent consultation, I know that's something that I really like about Adlerian Play Therapy, how that's set up. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Sure. So in Adlerian theory, again, it's what is going to be the best needs of the client. And so in general, we want to share the session. So half of the session, we're going to be spending time with the child, and then half of the session we spend time with the parent. What we believe is we're really influencing the system. So we're working with and collaborating with the entire system. And so what that means is I don't want to just see the child and not really get to interact with the parent, because I want them to be just as involved. And the parent actually follows the 4 phases of Adlerian theory or Adlerian Play Therapy along with the child. So as the child is in that very first phase of building that equal relationship, we're also doing that with the parents too. We want them to be bought in. They need to be partners with us in this process in order for the child to really be able to modify some of their behaviors, because some of them does stem from that parent-child relationship. And so how can we help them understand their child a little bit differently? And so they follow each of the phases. We even get into phase 2. Not only are we asking them about their perception of their child, but we're also wanting to gauge their own worldview, their own lifestyle. How are they viewing themselves? How are they viewing others in the world? Because we know that influences how they're parenting.
Absolutely.
So if they're feeling that the world is unsafe, then they're going to be parenting in such a way that is creating these same messages for their child. And so we want to help them be able to see that differently as well. So in phase 3, helping them gain some insight into how they're viewing themselves and how they're viewing their child, so that they can start modifying some of those beliefs, those mistaken beliefs that they might have.
Absolutely. And I think having them a big part of the whole process makes a world of difference. That's huge to have that parent component, especially half and half like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And again, that's a flexible part of it. So if it doesn't work out with that family, you can modify, how that works. So maybe see the child one week and the parent the next week if there's not because I know some sites don't have someone to watch the child while they're seeing the parent. There's just not childcare available based on your agency, or maybe you're in private practice, so you're by yourself. Mm-hmm. And so being able to modify that. So maybe one week the child comes and the next week the child doesn't come, so that you can just meet with the parent. And then so you rotate every other week in that process in order to fit the needs that you have as a therapist in the field.
Yes, just kind of working logistically what works best to make it happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, the frequency would be half and half, like all the way through the 4 phases then, right?
Absolutely, yes. Because you also want the parents to start practicing some of those phases as well. And you're teaching parents some of the same skills, so that then as a child is modifying their behaviors, the parent is also responding to the child a little bit differently too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like if they're part of the process, then they're more likely to change the way that they interact with the child, which I know that that's a big influence on the child's behavior or their healing process. Now, you talked about treatment plan. What would that look like? And you said that it gets developed after phase 2, when that conceptualization chart is in place. What would the treatment plan look like for Adlerian Play Therapy sessions?
Absolutely. So you're really looking at taking the conceptualization of the child, and so how they are viewing the lifestyle, how they view themselves, others, and the world. And so really what that looks like is I'm taking in all these pieces that I've collected. So for instance, assets. So what are things that this child is really good at? One thing that I find interesting in working with parents is sometimes it's just reframing a negative behavior. Mm-hmm. So a child might be really bossy, or might be really stubborn to a parent, or hard-headed might be some of the things that I've heard parents say. However, if we really think about those qualities, we would love for our children to maintain those qualities in adolescence when peers become important, or even in adulthood, to be a leader in their world. And so we don't want to squash those. We actually just want to maybe modify how they're being viewed. And so that could be an asset that we want to encourage, but encourage it in a positive way of showing it. So when you're doing your conceptualization, you're noting down maybe some assets that they have. And so then in the treatment planning, it's kind of paralleled. And so then it's what am I wanting to encourage in that process? So what are my goals for change with this asset? So for instance, with the idea of being maybe stubborn or, hard-headed, those types of things. Well, my goals for change are to use that more in a adaptive way. So, on that continuum in Adlerian theory, from maladaptive behaviors to adaptive behaviors, we believe that all behavior is purposeful. They're getting something out of it. So how can we use that stubbornness in a very adaptive way, make it something positive for that child? And so what strategies do we want to use in order to change that, or help them work through modifying that behavior? And then we also want to, how are we going to measure it? So what's that progress? Mm-hmm. So those 3 things, goals for change, strategies, and the progress and how that's being measured, are across each of the categories in the lifestyle. So, and I'll just briefly mention them here, but again, I would refer to Kottman and Meany Wallen's text, because I think that you can really learn a lot more in a lot more depth than what we're able to really address here.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But assets are one, and then life tasks. So how are they functioning at these life tasks, and then how can we readjust those? And then also personality priorities and crucial C's. Now, for those three, life tasks, personality priorities, and crucial C's, you're actually looking at a continuum. So where do they fit with those? Because, of course, we all have the 5 life tasks. We all have one identified personality priority that we mostly function from, but we might be using these in a very maladaptive way. So we might be rating them a little lower because they're not in a healthy way. So where are they? And then let's triage those. Which ones are we going to address first? Within the life task, maybe this child is doing okay within the family, but they're failing at school and they don't have any friends. Well, then I would want to start working with those life tasks quicker than I would with maybe the ones that are at home that aren't bothering them as much in their day-to-day life, in their ways of finding that significance and that belonging.
So prioritize them, just see which one do you want to address first that's going to make that big shift in the child's life and have them feel that change the quickest.
And a lot of times when that happens is that the other things just fall into place because that was really what was impeding their ability to feel significant. And so once they're able to feel that significance, they no longer need to get their other needs met in maladaptive ways because we've modified their view of themselves within these certain categories that they were struggling with so much.
Yeah, I've heard it like in terms of the way that you just described it makes me think of like the metaphor of the Jenga game. If you could get just that key piece and pull it, then the whole tower will fall down. So if you get that one area that they're really struggling in, then the other ones may just kind of, especially if that generalizes, it may just kind of dissolve the issues and have that treatment be just more effective. And not have to do each area individually.
Right. And that's why I think it's so important to truly understand the child's lifestyle, because then you're really finding ways to intervene that are going to be the most powerful for that child. And so each child is different. I might have 5 children who all have a personality priority of control, but because of the other aspects of their lifestyle, these might manifest in their world differently. Yeah. And so I can't try the same interventions with that child because I need to understand their full lifestyle and be able to really intervene in a way that's going to be most meaningful for that child.
Seems very thorough, customized to the child's needs. It's not a blanket approach where you just say, okay, this child has this behavior, and so you do this. It's really looking into that individual child. Seems like that's right early on in phase 2 when that happens. Oh, that's awesome. I remember in the training you talked about the functions of behavior too.
Yes, so there's different ways. Like we can look at it from more of what a child is lacking, like the goals of misbehavior, which was developed by Dreikers. And so those goals of misbehavior are power, inadequacy, revenge, and attention. And then it's on the flip side of it, we can look at it in the crucial C, so more of this positive way of kind of getting their needs met of significance and belonging. What I like about the crucial C's is that it really takes the goals of misbehavior and flips it on its head of, well, there are things that this child really is doing well, and so how can we help encourage some of those ones that they are doing well at to help maybe those other areas that they're struggling at even more.
Okay, so for those that's listening and they want to learn more about it, definitely I'm going to have a link to purchase the book in the show notes. But where can people find training in Adlerian Play Therapy?
So actually, we do have a training coming up at the Center for Play Therapy Training and Research here in Central Florida. Terry Kottman was going to be coming in March of 2018, so a little less than a year away. We are having her for a 1-day training where you can come to a conference. It's going to be 6 hours on Adlerian Play Therapy, so getting to learn more of what we've talked about tonight in more depth. And then if you're really interested in being trained and certified in Adlerian Play Therapy, you can start that process through the 4-day training that's coming directly after that first day. and it's limited to only 9 slots. We do have slots that are still available at this time, but you get the intensive training, you get to work with the child, and you get supervision by Terry Kottman herself to really make sure that you're implementing the 4 phases accurately with this child that you're getting to work with. So you can find that information if you Google UCF, Center for Play Therapy Training and Research. It'll pop up and you can see upcoming trainings.
Oh, that's
and it'll
awesome.
be there for you.
Right here in our own community. What a great, great opportunity. Well, yes. Thank you so much for being on the show, Dr. Taylor. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed talking about my favorite topic.
All right. For those of you who are listening and you would like the show notes for this episode, you can find that at playtherapycommunity.com. And also, we would absolutely love to have you join us in our closed Facebook group, Play Therapy Community. You could just do a search for that and visit the website, playtherapycommunity.com, just to get more information. And really appreciate you listening, and thank you so much. And until next time, take care.
To join our growing community for free, just go to playtherapycommunity.com and find us on Facebook too.
Thanks for listening to the Play Therapy Community Podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.